it'd be nice if we had a big enough community. Yeah.
Sorry, I hope it's okay if I record this. I won't release it. I'll just
Yeah, that's fine.
save it for our own information later. But please go ahead. You
That's
were
fine.
talking about.
I have OBS running if you want it from my end. Um, so sites like Banggood and Alibaba, they have all these parts like stepper motors and 80/20 beam or any type of that other guy that I linked you from um, Michigan State University. He uses, I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's called grid beam.
I've heard of
It's
it. Yeah.
basically just any type of it doesn't have to be an extrusion. It could be made out of wood, DIY type of stuff. But it's basically so that if you buy lumber and then build things with it, like shelves for planting or aquaponics or something like that, or even furniture, you're not nailing it together. You're not gluing anything. It's all held together with bolts, kind of like Meccano or an erector set or something like that, so that you can always take it apart and reuse it. So it would be nice to have a built-up collection of all these type of parts, especially all of the electronics parts, so that as we age out, you figure that the open source plans that you would actually build an automated greenhouse with, all of those mechanical parts and electromechanical parts, all the actuation in there is going to have a finite lifespan and it'll need to be maintained. So just for the sake of, because we have no idea what's going to happen in this country in terms of international relations. They say they're trying to goad us into a war with China. So while we can still get the parts that are available, it'd be nice to stock up on them so that we can run our greenhouses, reliably for the next, given 20, 30 years. One thing that I maybe you can answer this question. So you mentioned you're already doing it. As far as I've been able to find, there's no one that has quantified any of the research in terms of, you're growing your own food, trying to offset bills, trying to have the convenience of being able to just eat salad right out of your backyard. Nobody has ever really quantified exactly the economic inputs to that system and then the actual, like, measure it against what you would have spent on a grocery bill to get the same amount of food, basically. Like if it fed you for so many days adequately, calorically, I mean, and vitamins, like you're not having to take supplements or anything. You're actually eating wholly out of your own, sustaining yourself and everybody there from the garden. How much is that actually saving you, in terms of versus your inputs? So that, because I think what would be nice, the community that you're proposing, um, it's almost like a research project. You're making a model of a future neighborhood. So it would be really interesting if you could quantify the economics to the point to where um, maybe some family that exists in a food desert, where they can't get to a grocery store because the bus system is crappy or something like that. I have friends in Detroit that suffer from this problem actually. If they could actually know, if I'm going to invest, $400 in this system to grow, cabbage in my closet or whatever on my balcony on a crappy apartment or something like that, at what point is this going to pay for itself? Like the economics of getting solar on your house or something like that. They say it's going to take 30 years to pay off the loan and it'll pay for itself after 10 years or whatever. So where are the sort of thresholds that you could actually put on a calendar for that so that you can say, okay, this is a worthy investment. You're going to get this amount of productivity out of it. You can measure that in dollars or whatever. And obviously, there has to be some kind of maybe like food cost index or something to where the buying power of a dollar, not just inflation, but like what is the market doing at the grocery store, and how can you actually measure that against what you're doing at home? If we could do that, I think it would be actually of great benefit globally, just for people to know that.
Yeah, well, you said a ton, and Adrian definitely is the person to talk to you about solar costs, since he installed a pole mount solar panel at the current house and has
Cool.
worked through the economics and kept track of the cost and most of the work himself, and is planning, to help others, like including our second house, to have a solar panel on the rooftop. And his fiance's sister has a horse barn, and they're thinking of installing solar panels there. And many people in Michigan, don't think about solar, and that's definitely a big area. I'm like you. I'm kind of more methodical, but also I enjoy the experience of gardening. And what Adrian said today was like he wanted to garden instead of meet indoors in front of the Zoom, and that totally made sense because that's an enjoyment that humans get. I haven't worked out a rigorous study, and I think I would, but with the caveat that some things you can't quantify. Like, some people say like, well, my time is worth money, but everyone can get different paying jobs. So should you count that against the home garden because you're spending time doing it, but you also enjoy it? So, how does that work out? Are big companies externalizing the amount of carbon they produce? Whereas, in your home garden, maybe you should get credit for like absorbing a lot of the garden and composting and improving the soil. So I would find the data super interesting and
That'd be interesting.
And as one aspect, not the whole thing. Whereas like if the number comes out positive, we should do it, and if negative, then we should just discard the whole community idea. But it's a long journey. I agree with you. It's decades long. It's more fun to do it together.
Yeah. I mean, you could even, yeah, I think it'd be amazing to just, I mean, everybody has stupid hobbies these days, but this is an actual altruistic one that could actually help things, and the collaboration would be fun. But also, I could envision you're familiar with all the crypto stuff. I saw your background in Ethereum or something.
Sure.
What if we could actually maybe figure out how to create a marketplace to where you could, I don't know, create some kind of speculative type of cryptocurrency or whatever as an incentive for people that live in impoverished areas or food deserts or things like that, to incentivize or maybe help them fund something like that. Because, yeah, like you said, they are actually doing a bit of carbon offsetting, even just in terms of like not having to drive a car to the grocery store, things like that.
Yeah. Adrian, any thoughts on what we've discussed so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think my main response would just be, I think I kind of hear a lot where you're coming from in terms of like people haven't worked out the economics, which I sort of I feel like there's definitely like, not that I've done super extensive research, but yeah, there isn't like a ton of people posting detailed information about, what is the finances, for example, but not just finances. I think there's a lot of things that, what does it look like to kind of not rely on this global, economy, and rather, produce energy more locally, produce more local food. So anyway, yeah, all of that, is really a big motivation, I think, I think part of the project is to just kind of open source, if you will, like our experiences, putting out there, here's the costs we've seen, and, just letting other people see that kind of like, I think describing it as like a research project is a good idea. And maybe it even would be, maybe there's some opportunity to get it recognized in some context as sort of like research, and, get the word out about it so that people actually look at it and could benefit from, what we're publishing. But yeah, that's definitely a big element of this, is to try to like put information out on the website or wherever, so that other people can kind of see what we're doing, and what the finances look like, and, all of that stuff. So yeah.
Plus, I mean, you have to assume that anyone who replicates this experiment at any scale is going to add to that data and make it that much more accurate. So I don't know if either of you have read the recent Jaron Lanier books where he's talking about microtransactions for participation in social networks to try and get away from the ad revenue model, or the attention economy, or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way to fund some of this stuff like that, or at least get the ball rolling in that direction, because at some point, this is the idea. I think we'd have to coin a term for it, but it's really just an advancement, really, of everything that we are doing, where we're taking just like the microfabricator microfactory that OSC proposes, or even the global village construction set. You're taking capital goods like tractors and things like that, and you're putting that under the control, or perhaps restoring the control and ownership to a single family. And so you're rewinding it, but at the same time, you're still sort of it's definitely an advanced thing because you're no longer involving bankers necessarily. So you have to take the power out of their hands, out of like the financialization of everything, and put it into more cryptocurrency so that people like you and I and just normal people can actually have control of the system, and it democratizes it to some degree, I hope.
Yeah, and I think that's something just to kind of add to the thought of like, using crypto or whatever as like an alternative to kind of, banking or the current financialization of everything. One thing, that's definitely something Paul and I in particular are, pretty interested in. It's exciting for us. However, one of the things we've realized is, we're biased and there is a lot of complexity, lack of understanding, difficulty in just getting into it and trusting that stuff for just like people that aren't like us.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one thing I feel pretty strongly about. And I think I think Paul, correct me if I'm maybe misstating it, but yeah, we definitely are very interested in doing that and like seeing where that can go. But at the same time, we don't want to make that the focal point. We kind of want to de-emphasize this like techno element of it because we found that can scare people off, make it seem like the project's inaccessible. So I think that's just something we've come up against and just have talked about in different forms. But I think we're both very interested in that idea, and I think it has a lot of potential. And we have there's some blockchain community folks, pretty diverse, cool crowd in Detroit that we're connected with too. So there's definitely enthusiasm around that. But at the same time, we definitely want to make sure that's not a barrier for people feeling that this project is valuable or feeling like they can't participate, because ultimately we really just want people involved in the local community to be participating. We don't want anything, to sort of make them feel uncomfortable or like, that there's something that they don't understand going on, but it's not like it's that different from the financial industry. A lot of people have been barred out of that too. Like they don't know what it's like to get a loan or,
I mean,
go through all that.
Aren't you an app developer?
But I have a background in software.
Yeah, I mean, like for instance, countries in Africa that actually need like micro banking, that's a case study right there on how to actually implement this here.
Yeah.
To where normal people could actually use it, because I mean, it doesn't matter how poor you are, you still have a smartphone these days.
Yeah. No, that's a great point.
That can be all you need.
Shielding people from the complexity and making them feel like that's one thing we've talked about. Is just like if people can just like get money or whatever value, that's the most important thing. But I think talking a lot about crypto, all these things sometimes up front can like turn people off or
it
whatever,
would definitely be the weeds that you could get into if you wanted to. And obviously I think, like I said, if it's a research project and it's presented in a transparent fashion, kind of like the Marson dude is all about the way he conducts himself, it'd be a potential source of attention that you could turn into some kind of revenue to help fund it. But at the same time, in sharing it, it lowers the intimidation factor of actually getting into it. Because if somebody can, as a hobby, view all of the steps that we went through to establish something like this, and all the mistakes that we make, they don't have to make. Like for instance, I spent the last few years trying to do a nonprofit. It ultimately failed, but it was basically trying to create agro drone technology for actual farmers in like impoverished areas where, I don't know if you know anything about like rural India, but just importing things from China is costly. They have all kinds of tariffs and barriers to actually get things, whereas us here in the US, we can order things from, like I said, Banggood, eBay, and it's dirt cheap. So we can get an overabundance of the parts, do all the crashes, do all the research, in producing some kind of new thing, there's a lot of experimentation that is going to produce waste in terms of, broken parts and things like that, and other tooling that other people can't necessarily afford in order to figure these things out. But once they are figured out, all those variables are taken out of the equation. So they no longer cost the person who's going to implement it, because they're not just trying to figure it out. They're actually doing like a paint by numbers, they have a BOM, building materials, step-by-step instructions, and very little margin for mistakes, because we've taken all that complexity out.
I'm going to interrupt here and sorry, and tons of great things. I'll just clarify that BOM for people listening is bill of materials, and not like an actual bomb, like an explosive. But yeah, sorry, continue your point, Jaron, but I definitely want to follow up on this.
Yes.
Oh yeah, well, I guess I'll take the mic since I've stolen it, but
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, the two themes, I mean, great dialectic so far. The two themes I see is sort of technologizing something, like making a best practices, and even if it's imperfect, having it out there in an open source way that people can,
even if it doesn't involve technology.
Even if it doesn't, and especially
like Adrian was saying, even if it doesn't.
Yeah, technology could just be your 3-ring binder of paper step-by-step instructions. Like, it doesn't have to be actual code or electronics, but it could. And, just make that so transparent and freely available that it becomes more normal, and maybe people become more familiar and less scared. But yeah, Adrian's correct.
Also, possibly creating the information architecture to allow people that are not super tech savvy or not predisposed to being so sharing. Like they have the like button on YouTube videos. If somebody replicates this and it works, make the interaction minimum but still valuable. So for instance, I replicated this and the instructions worked 100%. So click one button and then you have another dot on a map saying that it worked here too. Just something simple like that, to where everybody, and they get something for that, they get a star by their name or something, that shows that they're, to try and pull people into the community so that they feel a part of it and that they actually are a part of it. And then if they want to start taking pictures and videos of what they're doing, or saying, actually adding to the conversation, saying that, I did this and I found this, because the materials for doing everything are different all over the world, and how to source things. In looking for, I was actually looking at real estate around Marston's installation in Missouri, and I found this, like, it looked like a barn, and it was obviously somebody super, super poor that was living there, but they built like this loft, and it had like tree branches nailed up in place of like lumber, and it was still effective, to make sure people wouldn't fall over this thing on a second level. And I'm thinking, like, that cost him nothing. And to see that, your concept that's like super high, Home Depot, Lowe's, that was implemented in like rural Africa somewhere with nothing but, natural found materials, if the concept holds sound, I mean, I think that'd be really interesting if they could share that, or at least, even if they could only share text through like an old Nokia phone, if they could still document what they did, it'd be kind of cool, and I think it would add value.
Oh, definitely. If we make it easy to
because ultimately it's not just about Detroit, right? It's about everywhere. You want this whole plant, this whole neighborhood to be like replicable right the next block over, and also replicable on the other side of the planet.
Yes, that's definitely the grand vision and what Open Source Ecology is doing. We are applying it very specifically to Detroit because, at least in my mind, if you expand, if you try to grow too quickly, like some people call it jumping over yourself, then you becomes abstract and you lose focus and maybe you get burned out. And so I agree with what you're saying. I haven't read Jaron Lanier's more recent stuff about microtransactions. I read his earlier book about like what technology wants. Like, technology is not a completely neutral force that people say, but making things easier still requires sort of mental remapping at first. And so even if you use the flip phones that people have, in their minds, it's the mental model people have in their minds that takes some getting used to. And right now, if you tell someone something, they're like, well, why should I trust you that this global network exists? And if you're a programmer, you can verify, you just like, oh, I believe in ledgers and blockchains because the math, the numbers add up. But if you don't have that, you're taking someone's word for it. And right now they're taking the word of bankers and legal systems that, for all their flaws, have existed and are stable and well understood. And then if you ask them to trust what could appear to be a different priesthood, then you have to be careful. With COVID and vaccines, there are people who don't trust any kind of central authority mandating that you should do this because it's better for you and we say so, and that sort of thing. So I get where you're saying from, and I want to address sort of like the other side, that we want to give people the benefit of fresh vegetables and community and experience a house and not sort of upfront overload them with like our presentation. Because I did that. I gave a whole talk, and Adrian knows because I did it at his house before I lived there. I gave a whole talk about what the blockchain was so great and how we would democratize home ownership. And I got a lot of skepticism and pushback. And I think part of it was like my attitude that like this was the one right way and everyone should like jump on board. And it's a little like slower than that. It'll in different areas, like people may choose to come at it differently, or it'll just take time. And so I think go slow. There's a phrase, if you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, then go together. And so which is slower. So
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, but I do want to experience.
At the same time, if you can open up, if you can build a framework for global collaboration, or at least set an example and share it publicly, that's got to speed up the conversation to some degree.
Oh no, I definitely
I think you can go slow and fast.
I mean, one thing, and sorry for interrupting, Adrian, but I've been moving to be more open. So Adrian knows I've been pushing to sort of make our Trello board and this pipeline called Streak for tracking contractors that we're using to renovate the house, making it public so people can see what we're doing and offer feedback. And it seems a little strange at first, and even an Instagram account, which I'm against superficial uses of social media, but I do want people to be able to see what we're doing and for us to connect with people who wouldn't otherwise know. But it could also just be a kind of like getting likes and attention kind of thing as well. So there's a balance of both. And I kind of lost my train of thought. But Adrian, you were about to say something before I interrupted you.
Oh no, I don't. I didn't have anything too much to add actually.
Yeah. Well, so and the next thing I want to do is
now I remember. Yeah, I was just gonna say like on the global free. I know my view is like, act local, think global maybe, but it's kind of like, we're doing this at a local level. We really are invested in Detroit. That's a very deliberate decision. And obviously what we're doing is there's a lot of things that will be, sort of like Detroit specific and wouldn't necessarily apply elsewhere, but of course lots of stuff would. So like by publishing it out on the internet, obviously, it can have this kind of global impact and visibility, but we're definitely like, that's kind of, I think, the way we would think about that. We're not like putting it forth as like, we're creating a new model for the world or something like that, right? We're really like genuinely invested in benefiting the city of Detroit, like creating a model that works here. And if it benefits people outside of that, that's great. And we obviously, I think it can, but
I don't think there's any way it couldn't, really. I mean, almost every place in the US and most of Canada and even a lot of Mexico looks at the same architecture, the same infrastructure, it's the same fabric, it's the same type of land, the same type of community structure even, or lack thereof.
Yeah, although I would disagree slightly in that saying that like there is differences that matter a lot, but I think it's like there's
you think it's cultural?
I'm just saying anywhere, and not just Detroit or anywhere. I just think that like that one of the philosophies I have around this is that it is important to do things in a local context, and
Oh
that
yeah.
does have a trade-off, like something that you're really trying to make work and trying to really be locally oriented fundamentally has limitations, like some materials don't exist locally, for example, so that limits, maybe that might drive the cost up, or that might have some, that there's certainly implications of that. So but if you wanted to have like something that like is really scalable, it works anywhere in the world, that might mean that you're now going to choose a different material to build with that might,
Yeah.
so I think that's part of this, is that, I think our current world is very much dominated by this one size fits all type thinking. And I think in a lot of ways, I see this as a project to kind of prove that that isn't the only way to do things, and that all that has certain benefits, lowers costs, all whatever, but it also has certain costs, like not understanding how you're impacting things as much. Like, the best material for ultra efficiency could end up polluting the hell out of, some country that we're extracting the materials from, and people barely even are aware of that, right?
Yeah.
Whereas things are happening locally, hopefully, if there is a negative impact, we would know about it because we're in the same local community, for example, or
Yeah. And that's probably a really good idea, to share that kind of information to prevent mistakes happening from, in the places that would replicate our plans. But I think, maybe the one of the definitions of intelligence would be to, you see a specific implementation um, that's specific to the one place, and you can abstract the sort of meta ideas and thought processes behind it to take what they did and, use what you have to replicate it. And I think all of this is ultimately it has to be a revolution in the way that we think as a species. The scientific method, for all intents and purposes, is still kind of like a plaything of the elites to some degree, and it should be what it was originally designed for, which is, it should be a tool of every man. And ultimately, I think everything like this, anything in this field, from building a 3D printer to, showing somebody how to load a custom firmware onto your cell phone or something, it's all a gateway to get people scientifically literate so that they can actually participate in the conversation. They say that things like Starlink and other types of terrestrial things like 5G, the rollout of that is going to have 2 billion more people on the internet in the next 6 years. But without guideposts and without good influences actually creating content, they're just going to fall to the lowest common denominator. It's just like giving Starlink to the Bible Belt here in the US. They're going to basically Google confirmation bias of terms that they're already familiar with. And if you have no way to insert new keywords for them to search for through media, through easier things than just text, then that revolution in thought process will never happen. And so in doing these new types of lifestyles, living the way that you want to live, and actually echoing it onto the internet and setting a positive example and explaining yourself, explaining the philosophy behind why you're doing what you're doing and all the technical details, so that somebody can learn from it and get your thought process and translate it into their lives. And you're lifting up their sort of technical abilities and it's not just ability, it's motivation, because I think almost anybody has the creative spark, but you have to free it to some degree, because everything else, every other system, is in opposition to somebody being that free, because every person that comes up like that, they're now competitive with, the existing market leaders. And if you can democratize the market itself of ideas and economics and everything else, great. This helps everybody, and it levels the playing field so that we eliminate the disparity between rich and poor, or even just, well off and secure and completely screwed.
So I think we can all agree that
Anything that we can do in that direction, I'm all for.
I think we can all agree that publishing the information is good, it can only benefit. And it's a hard thing to know. I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds of like what is intelligence or what we should be cultivating, but it's hard to know what to copy or how you're communicating to people that we're doing this and you should copy this part, but don't copy this part. I mean, there's a fundamental problem where, when people say like, there's an example. I say like, hello, my name is blank. You don't actually want people to say, hello, my name is blank. You want them to know to substitute their name instead. And you think that, and that's a silly example. But then when you get up to like farming, you'll say like, oh, we were telling you how great permaculture farming was in Michigan, but we didn't mean to use this kind of soil where you are because that's really hard to get. And so, I mean, that also takes, emotional intelligence. There's lots of different kinds. There's context. And yeah, I am definitely wanting to have a bulletin board, and we have a more decentralized blockchain-like token and an economy where we recognize this kind of work. But then, we're thinking about ways of, not overwhelmingly moving it towards something that would only appeal to a specific kind of person who is like rational and right brain, and also an outside speculator, like an outside investor. And my bias would also be towards people who like live in Detroit and like need housing. So it being based on the mutual benefit, and then seeing how technology can support that, rather than starting with oh, this technology is cool. And I mean, I think the technology is cool for sure. I have that bias, and so I try to work against it.
Yeah.
And but yeah, no, I think we're all seeing the promise of this approach and want to see it succeed. And also all of our viewpoints, I think, are moving us in a good direction. So we only have 3 minutes left, and it's probably for the best. I inadvertently put this on my personal Zoom account, which when 3 people appear, the timeout ticks down until a sales representative calls you and tells you to upgrade. But which is good, because I feel like it's leaving us wanting more. And until the next time we speak, I will be starting.
Feel free to share my email.
Oh, I will. Jason, yeah, we've been exchanging email, and if you're saying it's okay,
feel free to share my email if anybody.
Okay, yeah, if you mean the text of your introduction and your background, yeah, I'll share that. That'd be a great post, when we have a bulletin board. Thank you. And until the next time we meet, I'm thinking of this town hall or Zoom catch up to be once a month, and I will start at Open Source Ecology in Missouri, the apprenticeship there, on July 1st. And so I'll have hopefully like some great photos and maybe experiences and thoughts to share with you about that. And then since then, Adrian and I will be making progress on the house. And Jason, you're welcome to Vintage to visit anytime
to see it,
since you're in Detroit. And then hopefully other people will join us. I know there are people who call our Google Voice number, and we've been doing some light advertising, but we're going to reach out to a block club and do some organic reaching out to other people with similar interests. So
have you found anyone around Detroit other than you two?
A few people have expressed interest in community housing, but I think there's a lack of organization, or at least, or people have many concerns during this difficult time, right? It's pandemic, it's quarantine.
I'm kind of talking about more people that can implement this kind of thing, like that have the abilities to do it.
Like construction wise or technology wise, or some other aspect?
All of the above, just kind of willing and able to where they wouldn't be, they'd be able to drive it and not necessarily depend on it. You know what I mean?
Well, we don't want to depend on, obviously it would be great to find independent leaders and partner with them, but we also want to be able to create a framework for contributors to add on to. And so I would say,
benefit from it.
Yeah, I would say we probably don't need more technologists at this point, or I would be concerned about the mix. We definitely, I think Adrian and I see ourselves as engineers, or on the engineering side of this problem, and know that obviously to create a rich community life requires many different kinds of people. Yeah.
Well, or just people that can change hats very easily.
Sure. If someone had all this,
go from typing to picking up a hammer.
Yeah. Well, we do the best we can with we have a different mix of skills here as well. And anyway, I think we're gonna cut off any minute, but I thank everyone for coming, and I'll send the recording soon. And if you have thoughts, please keep them queued up or write them down, and we'll pick up at our next meeting.
Right, will do. Take
Yeah,
care.
great to meet
Nice to meet you.
All right.
too.
I hope to
You
talk
too,
to you
Jason.
again soon.
I'll shake your hand one day. Take care.